I'm going to be talking about Father Yod and the Source family.
You have been so excited to tell me
Do you know
this.
much about Father Yod?
Not a thing. I have never even heard of that name before. Spell it for me.
Y-O-D. Yoda.
Yoda.
Yod.
Yeah.
Hey, I wonder if that's where it came from, actually. This was before Star Wars.
Read it. We'll find out.
Well, it all started on Dagobah.
And he says everything. All sentences are kind of mishmash and out of place.
There were these
He kind of has like a mouth dyslexia.
He tried to eat this robot's breadstick, but why does the robot want a breadstick?
I think he just wants to have it as a souvenir. Like, man, like he's like Wally. He just collects trash. R2, that way.
R2, kill him.
I don't like him. He smells bad. He's talking to me, Luke Skywalker, Prince of the Galaxy.
Let's get into it. Table for one, please. Could I order a plate of divine enlightenment with a side of communal free love? No police scrutiny, please. I'm allergic to society's norms.
You wrote that. Check, please.
I'm sorry, your card's been declined. You're going to have to work at this restaurant.
This isn't a restaurant
This
anymore.
is how you get in cults. I write one bounce check.
Suddenly the place closes down.
I'm going to be talking about LA's very first restaurant turned cult turned podcast topic, the Source family. It all started, as many cults do, with a man. This time, the man's name was James E. Baker, born All-American on the All-American Day of July 4th, 1922 in Cincinnati, Ohio. He was born the great-grandson of the Mountain Man, who had 3 wives and 14 kids. And keep that in mind when you consider, is this nature, nurture, nougat sort of thing.
Yeah.
Jim Baker's dad was also named Jim Baker, and little Jim was 6 months old when his dad left. That should be
Never
known.
got to know his dad.
And I think you learn everything within 6 months of meeting somebody. This sent him on a lifelong quest to find and then become a father to whoever would have him as their father.
What a weird goal.
Who's your daddy? Me. After quitting high school, Jim joined the Civilian Conservation Corps before then going back to high school to become a swimming and state archery champion before then joining up to fight in World War II, where he was a Marine Raider in the South Pacific and was awarded the Silver Star Medal, which is the 3rd highest medal that you can receive. Behind the Medal of Honor, Modern Warfare, Call of Duty.
Hardest level. No cheat codes.
He went through World War II without using a single revive. According to him, during the war, he had shot down an entire fleet of attacking Japanese planes from the deck of a sinking Navy ship.
That sounds like something that someone would say without there being any proof of it.
I don't know. I mean, were you there?
But also, there was sharks in the water.
There were sharks. I punched them all in the nose, and they ran away.
And they swam away.
And also an alien. After the war, the 6'4" war hero that he was, he did the only thing he knew how to do, show off his masculinity by opening up Baker's Gym as a mecca for bodybuilding, martial arts, archery, and swimming. In 1949, he beat the world heavyweight judo champ in 17 seconds, and in 1950, he produced the Mr. America contest.
Wow.
I don't know why you're not impressed by this.
I'm impressed. I was about to start doing, can I do something while you read this? Dun, dun, dun. This sounds also 70s, and it's like, what, 1950?
In 1949. He was a strong man.
He's great.
That's what he was. But as the world found less and less use for strong men, he decided to try the one career that a guy with his talents was still useful for, Hollywood stuntman. So in 1951, he moved to Los Angeles to give it a try, and he auditioned to play Tarzan in the upcoming Tarzan movie, but he didn't get called back, so he decided to shave his head. And then they called him and told him he got the part, but now he didn't look like Tarzan.
Oh my God.
So he lost the part again.
They didn't have wigs back then?
No. So now he was just another nobody who came to LA to work in movies only to find he didn't look like Tarzan, just like all the rest of us. Now he had no hair, and he was getting sunburned. And good luck making friends in Los Angeles without hair.
Yeah, well, and all the Peter Lorre roles.
To try to find himself in 1951, he joined the Hindu Vedanta monks for 6 months.
Did he do that only because his head was shaved?
Yeah, he was halfway there. He went to the unemployment office. I've got a shaved head
and a high school diploma. What can I do?
Get to the Hindu temple, my boy. He also dabbled with the Nature Boys, who were some sort of ancestor to the LA hippie scene.
Okay.
And with them, he was influenced by the mystic Manly P. Hall. Everything he does is manly.
Yeah.
And he started down the path of the spiritual, health food, all natural way of life with these Nature Boys.
So that's kind of how they get you to start a cult.
Those Nature Boys are at it again.
Those nature rascals.
Nature House! While on this path, he opened up a sandal shop in Topanga Canyon and was twice accused and acquitted of murder for killing people by judo chopping them.
That's real.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe he was Tarzan.
I've never
Me
read-
Jane.
Me pain. Me in pain.
Me Tarzan, you in pain. He also claimed to have robbed between 2 and 11 banks to fund what would become his first restaurant, the Aware Inn, which opened in 1957 on Sunset Boulevard. Question?
How many banks? 2 to 11?
Between 2 and 11.
Police code for bank robbery is 211.
That's true. This is all just a sign that this is a divine man.
We have to rob banks now.
He opened this restaurant with his wife Elaine, and it was the first gourmet organic restaurant in the country. Naturally, it closed down, and he opened a second restaurant down the street called the Old World. Naturally, it closed down, and he divorced Elaine and left their 3 kids to remarry, from what I understand, a Samoan chief's daughter who he had cured of some illness with his organic methods.
Now you will marry me.
I have given you life, and now your life is mine. He then also left her and then got remarried to a French woman named Dora Jagla, who got him into the hippie lifestyle. Naturally, he divorced her too in 1969.
You're not a nature boy.
In 1969, he divorced her, but that was the year...
Sorry, what year was this?
1969.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they landed on the moon?
Yeah.
Supposedly. That was the year that brought him to an even greater love, or at least to a love of more than just one woman. That year, he tried to convince a hiker he met on a trail in Calabasas to give him $35,000 to open up a new restaurant based on the dietary wisdom found in the teachings of Jesus Christ as revealed through the Essene Gospels of Peace. Say no more. You had me at dietary wisdom. Luckily, I brought my emergency hiking $35,000 bill. So he got the money, and on April 1st, 1969, he opened up The Source. It was a restaurant on Sunset and Sweetser at 8301 Sunset, where Cabo Cantina now is, a cult of its own. Those margaritas are a cult. Ay, caramba. This episode brought to you by Cabo Cantina.
If you go on a particular night of the week, we will be working there.
Give yourself up to the salsa. This was one of the first of many to come restaurants in LA to market raw, organic, vegetarian food as being something that will benefit you spiritually, not just health, but spiritual.
Here's a head of lettuce is $15. God will love you if you eat it. That's what I imagine that's like.
No, it was cabbage.
Here's some Brussels sprouts at $30.
Brussels sprouts. Have you even seen the light? I mean...
Dude, have you even eaten the earth before?
Have you taken a knife and fork and gone to town on Mother Nature? I mean, who are you? At first, they served only uncooked food, but eventually their menu morphed into things like the Aware salad, which was one of the most popular dishes, and soon it was hugely popular.
Yeah, hugely popular.
In their prime, they were taking in $300,000 a month. That's more than your church. It was a celebrity hotspot for people like John Lennon, one of the four squares.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol, Oscar ruiner Warren Beatty, and food enthusiast, as an understatement, Marlon Brando. Celebrities, they loved it because the staff didn't care about celebrities and most things in this mortal realm, as you'll soon find out. This was also the restaurant that Woody Allen goes to when he comes to LA in Annie Hall.
Really?
Yeah, when he crashes into all the cars in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That's the place. So things were going well for little Jim. So he decided, why not drag another woman into it? So he got married yet again to a woman named Robin, and they took a trip to Hawaii where he was introduced to the Sikh teachings of Yogi Bhajan. It's weird because my uncle had a similar trip to Hawaii when he was in around the same time.
Really?
And he got introduced to like Yogi Bhajan. He became Sikh, and he's still Sikh. He's also big in like the health food world, and I'm wondering if he knew Father Yod because he was like basically the same path, only without a cult.
If there's only a way to ask.
And no... There isn't. So when he got back to LA, he started teaching meditation classes at the restaurant and insisted that his students call him Father. To learn more about the religion, he traveled to India and met Yogi Bhajan himself and studied under him. But Jim got a little too into it, and he started viewing...
Trying to marry him.
He's like, will you take my hand? Will you take this Brussels sprout wrapped into a ring? He started viewing Yogi Bhajan as God, which Bhajan denied since no man is God.
Yeah.
Then Father Jim, he took a boat down the Ganges to consider this, that no man is God.
Yeah.
And someone on the boat asked him if he was Hindu or Sikh, and in response...
Neither I'm God.
In response, he threw his turban into the river and said, neither a Hindu or Sikh will I be, for my soul is universal and free.
Oh.
And then, according to him, everyone on the boat fell to his feet and followed him around for the rest of his time
Is that
in
all
India.
it took?
Yeah, they had never heard rhymes before.
Wow.
That man threw a symbol of religion into a river. I love him. So now with a new self-created religion and a massive ego boost, Father Jim Bakker came back to LA. Now instead of just meditation classes, Bakker would give other sorts of classes in the parking lot of the restaurant on Sunday mornings where he would tell people about how the world really was. His new belief system pulled from pretty much every religion there was and was always changing depending on how he was feeling. He drew from Hinduism, Sikhism, Christianity, Judaism, Kabbalah. He was obsessed with the founding fathers, so he brought Freemasonry into it.
Okay.
Occultism, Buddhism. He would stare at the sun, whatever made sense to him.
It's like a buffet of just ideas. I made a quilt of religions and ideologies, and we're all going to live under it.
This is my ideological quilt. He believed in the eternal now. That's what he was into. He made up his own 10 commandments, emphasizing things like loving your father and sharing. The 3 worst things he believed he could do were to wait for one who comes not, to try to please and please not, and to love one who loves not, and also to cook the asparagus.
Trying to murder someone to death with judo is not on the list, strangely.
The worst thing, if you judo chop somebody, you better be judo chopping a kill. He even wrote a book in March 1971 called Liberation that had all this in it that he sold at the restaurant for $1, and people came to the classes, people drifted in and out. The only known celebrity to get involved briefly, your old friend, Bud Cort.
Bud Cort?
Yeah, Harold and Maude's own Bud Cort.
Brewster McCloud himself?
Harold.
Can I tell my Bud Cort story really quickly?
Let's hear your classic Bud Cort. Why can't either of us say his name?
I was at the 76 station on Hyperion by the Gelsons. I was getting gas, and Bud Cort came out of a car, and I held the door open for her, and he was like covered in paint.
Didn't he think he knew you from something?
Yeah, he kept thinking he knew me from somewhere, and I was pumping gas, and he was talking to me kind of about like gas prices or whatever, and then he thought he knew me, and we started talking about something, and as he walked away, I'm like, hey, Brewster McCloud's like one of my favorite movies. And I got in my car and I drove away before he ruined it.
I'm on drugs.
That was another thing he said. It was that he was taking pain medication. He's like, I'm kind of wacky right now.
And Maude was in the car driving.
She was on a motorcycle.
Attached to his car. Bud Cort wasn't technically, he just took classes there.
Yeah, he does.
But his original followers were his employees at the Source restaurant. And I am talking about Bud Cort.
Oh, you have to follow my religion or I'll fire you.
He had to kick out some of the employees that he suspected of stealing from him, but the ones that remained became known as the Brotherhood of the Source. Bakker was a commanding presence, and he put on this godly voice when he was doing his sermons, and these kids who worked at his restaurant were mostly in their early 20s that were alone in LA looking for a father figure and desperate for community and meaning, and Bakker stepped in promising to usher them all out of the age of Pisces and into the dawn of the age of Aquarius.
This is after 69, right? So
it's always after 69 if you're talking to me.
Manson family has already put the bad taste in everyone's mouth of being a runaway who joins a father figure. Yeah. But people are still like, that is a good idea.
That was a fluke. It was like the new age hippies, I guess.
Drugs. Just drugs and your parents not returning your phone call.
Because you couldn't afford to make the phone call because you're working at a vegetarian restaurant. Yeah, he promised the age of Aquarius, I will be your guide. If that wouldn't hook a raw bean curd eating runaway from Oklahoma, I don't know what else could. So the Source family was born from that. Anyone could join, but when you did, you had to give whatever you had over to the family to be shared by all of them, which usually wasn't much with these people. And that wasn't even a problem because the restaurant made more than enough money to support everybody. You also could not tell outsiders about the practices and rituals of the family.
First rule of the Source.
First rule of the
Don't
Source.
tell anyone about the Source.
There is no Fight Club.
Oh, weird.
You also had to adopt the last name of the family, which was Aquarian. Many of them even changed their first names to make it more fitting. They're like, there was Electricity Aquarian, there was Isis Aquarian, Long Beach Aquarian. Hey, that's their chant. They never went out recruiting, and they never had intentions to spread their beliefs beyond themselves, but they were very well known mostly because of the restaurant.
Yeah.
They were kind of beloved around town, and they were seen as the gentle Manson family.
Imagine your cult starting around the fact that you work at a Shakey's. Go ahead.
We are the Mojos. And for their part, they saw themselves as pioneers in the spiritual revolution that was going on in the early 70s. At first, the family lived in a fleet of vans parked behind the restaurant and a few scattered apartments, with Bakker living in a room above the restaurant. But in March 1972, Bakker rented out Harry Chandler's old 24-bedroom mansion in Los Feliz.
He had that much money to rent Harry Chandler's
He was making
old place?
$300,000.
I guess you're right.
It was at 2411 Iverness Avenue, and he paid $1,000 a month to house all of his followers, who at this point numbered over 100 of them. A well-staffed restaurant. This was the family's first communal home, and they called it the Mother House. However, as beloved as they may have been, having them all living together in one place doing weird rituals in the backyard brought too many bad memories of people from the real Manson family that had attacked just a few years before this. So their lease wasn't renewed after a year, so they all moved into a house in Nichols Canyon that became known as the Father House in March 1973. And all 144 people, including Baker himself, now had to fit into 3 rooms.
Oh my God.
I'll get more into that later.
I imagine like 70 of those people had to be the house itself.
Yeah, most of them were doors.
I'm a hinge.
I'm Hinge Aquarian. During their time at the Father House, the family became known for 2 things. The first was their fashion. Looking good was important to Baker and the rest of his followers. Baker cultivated a very specific look, growing out his hair and a long white beard, Moses chic. The rest of the family also wouldn't get haircuts and developed similar but less biblical looks. He would wear nice white suits and drove around in a white Rolls Royce. The rest of the family all wore long flowing robes and would change their style depending on what cultures they were into at the moment. They would be Egyptian or Asian or Roman or Greek or I don't know, John Belushi. That whole 70s free-flowing hippie look, it all stemmed from this, from this Source family. They set the trend for all that fashion.
I didn't know that. They were the source.
In so many ways. The second thing they became known for was their band. It went by several names such as Breath, Father Yod, and the Spirit of 76, which I'll explain. 76 because he was obsessed with the Founding Fathers. But they finally settled on the name Yahweh 13, which I will also explain. They played in the garage of the Father House, and originally they played structured, pre-written songs, but Baker pushed them to be free and improvisational, and what resulted was
jazz.
It was sometimes really great and sometimes unlistenable, but it was always weird, psychedelic, experimental music.
Yeah.
They played at the Beverly Hills High School in 1973 and recorded over 60 albums, 9 of which were sold for $10 each in a little store attached to the restaurant called the Hermit Hut on their own record label, which was Higher Key.
Hermit Hut sounds really familiar.
You're thinking of Hermits?
I might be thinking of Hamburger Hamlet.
Yeah, they formed that. I know that that vegetarian restaurant, the offshoot was Hamburger Hamlet. These albums, they're pretty valuable now, and they're sought after by collectors. Baker himself can be heard in several of the songs. He didn't play any instruments, so when the band, he saw the band having fun once without him, and he started going, I want to play. So they bought him a kettle drum that he could smash into, but he also recites some of his teachings in a few of the songs, but it wasn't all just high fashion and indulgent jam sessions in the Father House. This was a self-respecting cult. They got up to some weird stuff. A typical day in the Father House, it started at 3 a.m. Baker would lead everybody in stretches and meditation and a lot of marijuana smoking.
That all sounds great except for the last one.
Oh, prude. They did a lot of marijuana, but they never drank alcohol. Occasionally they did mushrooms, and once somebody brought cocaine, but Baker said he got as high as he needed from meditating and also marijuana. The hashish, which they would sometimes do, they would call it sacred shin. That's another thing of a cult. They have their own languages.
Yeah.
They were a very clean cult. So after the morning warm-up, everyone took a cold shower in the pool or wherever they could find water when you're in that one bathroom you had between 144 people.
Yeah, there's a fire hydrant that's leaking down the street. Go roll around, look around.
It rained yesterday. Some of the plants might still be wet.
I'm gonna just rub my body.
Then a rotating group of them would go to work at the restaurant. Another group would do chores around the house. Whoever was currently in the band would record music, and the artists would make art. And now the weird stuff.
I was just about to say the sentence, I hope this doesn't go bad.
A big thing of theirs was that they believed everybody was stuck in time locks that prevented us from awakening our spirit selves or the light body. One day, the day that they gave was April 23rd, 1973, Baker opened his time lock and went through a portal where he attained God consciousness, one of the few to ever do so in his earthly body, and he came out the other side of this portal with a new name, which was Father Yod. But this
he
name
took off his gray robes and he had white robes underneath.
I thought you were dead. No, I just killed a demon and you left me.
I said fly, don't leave.
Wait for like a day. But this name Father Yod didn't even last a year. Father Yod and the Source family were were obsessed with the tetragrammaton. I don't know how much you remember your Hebrew school.
I remember, but it's mostly in Spanish, and I don't speak Spanish, so.
That's the 4 Hebrew letters that spell out the name of God.
Okay.
But the proper pronunciation was lost to humanity a long time ago, so nobody knows how it's supposed to be said. So in Judaism, you're not even supposed to try to pronounce it. I got in trouble in Hebrew school for trying.
Elvis. Stop, Daniel.
You want to know what God's name is? Baba Booey. Other religions have claimed it's pronounced Yahweh or Jehovah, as in Jehovah's Witness.
Yeah.
But in February 1974, Father Yod claimed he had cracked the code and that he had found the true pronunciation, and that was Yahweh, the true name of God. He claimed it meant Yah, fire, Ho, water, Wah, air, and Ho, earth.
Like the Captain Planet.
Yeah.
Captain Planet says his name all the time.
Unite the elements. Yahweh! Naturally, he took part of this name for himself and went by the new name, like I mentioned before, Yahweh, which he claimed meant was, is, will be.
Wow,
so that's
okay.
him. But that's not even the strangest of the stuff that went on in that house. First of all, he'd walk around naked.
No, thank
Weird.
you. Yeah. I mean, like, even Adam had like a leaf.
Even he had some sort of a supernatural leaf clinging to his junk, clinging to his Rocky Mountain oysters, Rocky Eden oysters.
Emphasis on Rocky. Okay.
His Sylvester Stallone oysters. One follower claimed to see lightning bolts coming out of his ears. They used wands, and some claimed that their magic rituals, like a secret sacred ceremony called Quodosh, created a rent in the astral world, and they saw vampires hanging out on their staircase.
Okay.
Now, to address the logistics of how 144 people lived in a 3-bedroom house, they would just cram them anywhere they could.
Oh, okay. I figured.
They'd be in the attic. They'd be anywhere.
When you said 144 people were living in a 3-room apartment, I didn't think that like they did it in shifts. I just assumed that they just crammed in there.
Yeah, they were all in there. It wasn't an apartment, though. It was a house.
I was worried that it was an apartment that had 144 people.
You said apartment. I just want you to know this wasn't an apartment. They weren't breaking any lease.
You said only 140 people. Who's that other 4?
When I saw this signed rental agreement that looked like the Declaration of Independence, I didn't see ISIS aquarium.
All you said was no dogs. That's all you said. You didn't say I can't bring 140 people in here.
We have 2 rules. No hashish, and you can't have more than 140 people living in here at once. So they built what they called beehives and cubby holes in the bedrooms and hallways, which were basically 4x8 bunk beds 4 feet above each other, reaching up to the ceiling so they could fit over 30 people in a room.
You said beehives. Whatever I saw in my head, I like lost breath for a second because I got so claustrophobic.
Yeah. Oh no, I know. Not just claustrophobic, but just like, you know how it's gross when so many like bugs are living together.
Yeah.
Just like you walk into a room and it's like, it must have looked like a concentration camp.
Yeah, it must
but
have
with
just
great fashion. Vampires everywhere. A lot
Just
more
like-
vampires.
I mean, we all know that Goebbels and Himmler were vampires, right? Obviously. Hitler, not so much. He wanted to achieve it.
He
Not
was a
gonna happen.
Frankenstein. They also built platforms on the hillside out back to give people secluded areas for more private moments, which brings us to our next topic, the private moments. There were never
I want to talk about seclusion.
there were never orgies,
Okay.
but a type of tantric sex called Dianism was encouraged while you were there. Nobody was ever forced to sleep with anybody they didn't want to, and the women could choose whatever partner they wanted, and the man they chose just had to go along with it. That being said, menstruating women had to use what they called cuppy towels to catch their blood.
Okay.
Father Yod did have the power to reassign women from the men they chose, and the women weren't allowed to have outside contact in order to keep their purity.
Okay. That's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't talk to women, but other people I hear like that. I find it to be impure. Men who came into their restaurant weren't even allowed to speak to the female employees. There were also a few underage girls involved in the family. Yod was arrested once for having an underage runaway living there, but it turned out she had her parents' permission to come join, so it was okay. Here's your cuppy towel. Welcome. Welcome.
Small child.
Yeah. Your beehive is in Sector G.
By the way, I'm Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yod was supposedly big on liberating women, but at the same time, he had 14 women he claimed as his wives in the father house, stating...
It was up to them, then it's fine.
He stated spiritual law preceded man's law.
No, it doesn't.
These 14 women were mostly in their late teens or early 20s. Yod was in his 50s, and he called them his council of women. They ran most of the operations of the restaurant and the family while he went around naked shooting lightning out of his crotch or whatever he did, rattling his Rocky Mountain oysters. was into another dimension. With all that tantric sex going on, it was only a matter of time before babies started being born. The first one born was named Saul Amon, and 50 more were to come, all delivered naturally in this house. But Yod had a ban on Western medicine, so there was a lot of sickness that went around in there, and eventually one of the babies got a staph infection and was brought to the UCLA hospital, where I'm not sure, but I think it or another kid died. So this brought a police investigation, and they did not like what they saw.
They didn't like having to go through 100 and what's 144 what's 190 people?
It wasn't an apartment.
Landlord's okay with this.
Hey, read the lease. There's nothing in the lease about this. We smoke outside.
We didn't hammer nails to put posters up. What do you want?
We used command strips. Nothing's wrong here.
Nothing's wrong here.
Too many sick hippies living in bunk beds. That was enough. This sparked...
I hope that says in the police report. Too many hippies living in bunk beds.
This sparked a sort of transformation in Yod, where he did seem to start to see himself as something of a god, and this turned again. This is where the us versus them mentality, which is always a bad sign. Yeah. He predicted that a nuclear war was coming, followed by earthquakes, tidal waves, and volcanic eruptions. To get his followers ready, he started making them drink gold fluid condenser, which was melted gold that he claimed would protect them from radiation fallout, which I don't know how it did in Jonestown, all of them, by drinking gold.
Also, if I'm a follower, as much as I believe that this is God and I'm living in a family, I'm going to need some research. You know, like show me some raw data.
No, I mean...
If we all believe it, it's true, right? If the snozzberries taste like snozzberries.
The gold fluid condenser tastes like, I don't know, lead.
Dying.
But with police suspicion and impending nuclear war, Yod decided he had to get the family out of LA. He had set up an outpost in Hawaii in 1970. Hawaii.
Get this. The caves in Santa Susana Mountains. And they're like, no, okay.
There's a ranch in Chatsworth that I hear is empty. In 1973, he set up an outpost in Hawaii in case of such an event. He would tell his followers how good the fruits in Hawaii would be, and he would go, after each one. So he'd be like, coconut,
We're talking to a dog. Good.
No dogs there, though.
No.
Okay? Don't tell the landlord.
She doesn't bark. She's small. Let's just pretend we didn't see her.
You're not running a massive cult without Western medicine in here, are you? Is that a hot plate? So they all got excited about Hawaii, and then in 1974, he sold the restaurant and the Father House, which later would be lived in by ABBA, a cult of its own. He moved the entire family to Hawaii, but now, without the restaurant, they needed a new source of income, so they offered to work security at the airport in Kauai to keep hippies out of the airport. They weren't hired.
I know how to put this fire out. More fire.
Add better dressed fire. So they planned to open a restaurant there, but they found Hawaii wasn't as open-minded as LA, and people just saw them as the Manson family and wouldn't let them do anything. So now Yod was forced to go on a world journey to find a new home for his family that was not only accepting of them, but also affordable. He went out with a small reconnaissance group to Thailand, Nepal, India, Egypt, Greece, and other places, changing his name along the way to Yahowaho, Yahweh, and then back to Yahuwah. Meanwhile, the group he left behind got hepatitis.
While he's trying to figure out what name to call himself.
Whatever you do while I'm gone, do not get hepatitis. They called hepatitis the golden spell because of their beautiful skin color while they had it.
Oh my God.
In 1975...
golden spell.
Tetanus. In 1975, Yod settled in San Francisco, where he briefly changed his name again to Shinhwa after a Chinese restaurant he ate at that he really liked. And then he summoned the rest of the family. He called the rest of the family out of Hawaii to join him in San Francisco. They had absolutely no money to leave the island, so they had to beg the Hawaiian welfare to buy them tickets to San Francisco, which they wanted them away, so they got it for them, and then they all moved into a haunted mansion together in San Francisco and reunited with Father. But they still had
There were no windows and no doors, so that was just more room for bunk beds.
There's always my way into the restaurant business. They still had no money, though, so Yod told all the men, he told all the men, my grandfather Yod Toad, I'm descended from toads, Darwinism.
My grandfather's Yoshi.
He told them that they weren't allowed to have sex anymore and that they all had to go get jobs, all the men. This started to disperse the group because they were like, I can't have sex and I have to get a job.
This is not what happiness I signed up for.
And I'm living in the house of Haunted Hill.
I'm living in someone else's mouth because there's no room to do anything in here.
It made it harder to keep them all together. People going off, they had to get jobs. But Yod, he made one last ditch effort and moved back to Hawaii, brought them all. He commanded all family members to join them there or else they'd be kicked out of the family. He had managed to wrangle up a new place there for them to live there, but on August 25th, 1975, Yod saw one of his followers hang gliding, and he got so excited about it, he decided to try it without any experience or training at all. So he jumped off a 1,300-foot high cliff and crash-landed promptly onto the Waimolano campground on Oahu. Supposedly, his body was fully intact, and his last words were something along the lines of, "I meant to do that," because his followers...
Oh my God, I want to explode into confetti right now. That is the funniest thing I've ever heard. And I know that we're not supposed to laugh at death anymore, but I meant...
PC culture.
But I meant to do that after you jumped off a cliff is so funny.
His followers believed that he did that because he was finally ready to shed his mortal body, which he did. 9 hours later, dying at will of a broken body, pretty much. As per their tradition, so he's dead now. His body was surrounded by loved ones for 3.5 days. He was buried with no embalming, no autopsy, and no blood transfusion because they believed all memory was contained in your blood. So now all his followers were without a father, just like he himself was as a little kid, and that's kind of how the rest of them were without him. They were just lost little children. They were evicted from their new house in Hawaii shortly after he died, and they wandered around for a couple of years before slowly dispersing in 1977, and it wasn't an easy transition back into the real world. Some fell into bad ways. A few of the women moved to Las Vegas and became prostitutes. The ones in the band were able to keep some form of the band going. In 1977, they did an album with Sky Sunlight Saxon of the Seeds. They still tour even today. Sometimes they're playing. They've played with Billy Corgan. In 2003, they released an album called The Lovers and the Chariot, and in 2007, they played at the Echoplex.
Really?
Right near...
Angeles Temple.
Yeah. One of the women of the family, Isis, made a book of the story of the family that was originally just meant for the former family members, but it's available to anyone. She even had so much old video footage that in 2012, they made a documentary called The Source. Mm-hmm. There was a comic book about them in 2010.
Really?
There were a few reunions in Hawaii later on, and according to the post-cult group, the Children of Yahweh, the Source family officially dissolved on March 13th, 2016.
That was not that long ago.
No. I guess spiritually that chapter is over. A lot of the former members look back on their time in the family differently. Some of the women feel that they had been taken advantage of sexually and were sexually abused, with Father Yod referring to women as milk cows.
Wow.
Then there are the ones...
How progressive he was.
He loved women.
Nah, he loved milk cows.
Then there are the ones who were just simply disillusioned, and then there are the ones who look back and still believe that old almost Tarzan war hero creep actually might have been the father God that they were looking for. So people look back on it differently.
Wow, that's really...
Not violent.
Not violent.
Maybe sexual abuse.
Yeah.
It was free love, but for people who weren't necessarily ready to make decisions about love.
Yeah.
So that's the Source family.
I never heard of that before.